Years and years before, centuries, millennia, the water washes the gold out of its original deposit, redeposits it in a lower place where the water stops running so fast.
Every prospector who came to the Black Hills knew that the gold that's in those creeks, the placer gold, came from someplace else. It comes from a hard rock vein. It's gold eroded off of hard rock veins. As soon as people were digging in that stream getting gold, other prospectors are on the hillsides looking where that hard rock vein is that released that gold.
Messages from invisible sources, or what some people think of as progress.
The telegraph was brought to Deadwood, and that allowed Deadwood to communicate with the rest of the world what was happening. This started to really transform this community rapidly.
It provided instant communications with the outside world. You could find out immediately what the eastern markets were doing, what gold was going for. For people like Swearingen, he could seek performers over the telegraph. But for some reason, he kind of equated that with the end of lawlessness. So when the telegraph came in, he was one of the people who wasn't really for it. George Hearst, along with every other capitalist in the West Coast and the East Coast, heard about the gold in the Black Hills. Like the Manuel brothers, they heard about it and they started in the southern hills and worked up. The hard rock miner wants to find the source of all that placer mining gold. And that's what Moses and Fred were doing. They were looking for the source of all the gold that was in Whitewood and Deadwood Creeks.
April 9th, 1876, the Manuel brothers discover the Homestake claim, this Homestake lode. They sink a shaft then, and there's other shafts already operating in the area.
They found a 100-foot wide vein, and they started working it and taking out ore. They set up a mill just like this, an arrastra, to sample the gold. And what this would basically do is tell them how much gold per ton that they would be getting. They realized that they had rich enough gold ore that they went in and got stamp mills.
We would offer $200,000 for an undivided ownership on your claim.
We'd both have to fucking sell.
I presume your brother has stays and encumbrances on your right to separate sale?
He's encumbered every fucking breath I've ever fucking taken. 200,000.
Would it expedite matters if I made our case to your brother?
I'll make the fucking case once I find the saloon he's in.
William Randolph Hearst's old man came to town, and he starts to buy up all the claims because he knew that the placer deposits had to be near the original veins.
The Indians said that he could hear the ground talk to him. He had an ear for minerals. He would listen to the earth and hear what was there and see how it talked to him.
And if there's anything Hearst knows, he knows how to make money. He made millions on the Comstock lode. He made millions in Park City, Utah in 1872. And he comes to Deadwood with the money to buy rich mines.
He had money, and the one other thing he had was what he called tall lawyers. His tall lawyers had come into town, and they'd do everything that was legally possible to obtain a man's claim, whether the man wanted to move off of it or not. At one point, he had written home, and he thought it was amazing that he hadn't been killed yet, because he had just pissed off everybody on the planet.
Are we done with our buying, Francis?
All but one of the important finds. The Garrett find we don't yet own is not placed to obstruct operations.
I want it bought.
I believe its title will be contested in coming months. To act now would buy the contest and not the fine.
All this fiddle fucking around is tactical back and forth.
We're up and running, Mr. Hearst. With the mill right and double shifts, we should be full bore inside the week.
Get that out of the ground. That's what I love.
Hearst was not an evil character, but just somebody so totally focused on one thing that other things became relatively unimportant. People were, to him, like any other piece of mining equipment, to be used and taken care of as much as one could, but when they did wear out, you disposed of them and got fresh.
When you have, let's say, 5,000 or 6,000 people in Deadwood looking for claims, there's none to be had. And up on the hillside, there are these mines, shaft mines, starting to develop. They need money. Where are they going to go? They go work for the mining company, and they become day wage labor.
The Chinese are no different than the Europeans when it came to gold. They followed the gold strikes. When they said there was gold in Deadwood, the Chinese started coming.
The Chinese arrived just as the gold rush was exploding. And they're there to make money off the white miners doing their laundry and cooking them food.
Many of them came and established domestic services. So many of them, of course, in a gold booming town, are single men. Single men don't like to wash, they don't like to cook, or don't take the time because they're mining. The Chinese are clever enough to know that money is able to be made through their restaurants, through their laundry.
Of course, the Chinese have traditionally not lived within the confines of the dominant white population. They know they will live in a segregated portion of town. And they want to live in a segregated portion of town, from my understanding, because they do want to continue to practice their practices without having to integrate with the majority population. So they move into lower Deadwood. You have the Badlands down there where the rough saloons like the Gem and the Bella Union form up. The Chinese end up moving down there.
Through the archaeological record, we are learning about the daily lives of the Chinese. When I did get to this project, I knew that we were in the Chinatown area of early Deadwood. The amount of artifacts that we've taken from the site is phenomenal. Counting all the fragments, we've got several 100,000. What I'm beginning to see is how the Chinese lived daily. And I was surprised to see how they could keep their cultural traditions and yet still adapt to the environment on the western frontier. The archaeological record doesn't lie. It's there. We can see how they did contribute to the establishment of many towns on the western frontier.
These rags were fine broadcloth shirts before I brung them to launder. Huh? 60 bits. No, you. Hold me.
Looks to me like a deteriorating situation, Sheriff.
Downright intolerable.
Goddamn piece, you hear me?
I hope that slant-eyed cocksucker's look ain't as arrogant close up as it appears from this distance.
We use the word Chinaman and chink a lot. But that is just a reflection of how we existed in America and what America thought of us and how we survived.
The white folks resented the Chinese in that the Chinese could do things a lot cheaper. And this resentment manifested itself in incidents like beating the hell out of a Chinaman or hanging him up by his thumbs on the rafter.
Traditionally in the West, there has been animosity towards Chinese, and it'd be easy to understand that as being animosity here in Deadwood. However, this racism did not really boil to the surface as much. The Chinese here were not seen as direct competitors. They never really entered the mines per se. They were not recruited by the mining companies to work. They stayed in their part of town, and they only stayed in these very secondary jobs.
The Chinese were not allowed to work in the mines. They could have their own mining claim, do their own prospecting, and they certainly did that. But as far as them working in any other mines, they were banned from that. The other ethnic populations that were coming into Deadwood at the time said, we're not working for you if you hire any Chinamen. They worked hard, they worked cheap, they were ambitious.
It's a dream that we, all of us Chinese living in America, have, and that's for a better life. It's not just this white America that came in and, developed this country and wrote the articles and the Bill of Rights and the the Constitution, but guys like me had a hand in it too. My people had a hand in that, building this country too.
The Chinese did really good. You know, they had a lot of the restaurants, the laundries, and so on. But there was a very active opium trade and very active prostitution.
There were Chinese brothels everywhere of many young Chinese girls who came to this country thinking they were coming to be married. They really came in ignorance, unaware of what was going to happen.
It was 90% men to 10% women, and 90% of the women were whores. That was the nature of the environment. It was not a society that required children to till the land. You know, these were people looking to steal.
It must have been thrilling in some ways to be part of that adventure. Prostitutes can follow the news as well as anybody else and hear about gold strikes and want to get there. They're not going to make that money by going out and panning or staking a claim, so they use the skill that they have to be in the bars, to sell drinks, to dance, and to offer sexual services.
To say that prostitution was legal in Deadwood would mean that there was a law saying that it could happen. There was no law at all. So prostitution did thrive.
What a tiny corner of operation for such an amusing mind. I'll promise, as I sojourn here, bring you stories of the world of men.
I'll just be here in my girl's world diddling myself.
There's a common feeling that prostitutes just made loads of money and they had loads of fun. Certainly, there was an occasional wealthy madam, and towns loved to talk about Mattie Silks, for example, Chicago Joe, all that they did, how flamboyant they were. But to look at prostitution seriously, need to look at the rank and file of women who made up the workers in the industry of prostitution.
Some of them were in an economic situation where it was probably the only way they could survive. I think if you weren't talented on the frontier and willing to live on a little bit, you don't have a lot of choices.
They are immigrant women, Irish women, French women, Chinese women. They were African American women, former slaves who came to the West. These are women who come from poor families and poor communities. The options for these women are extremely limited. And in large families in the American West, children were often looked upon as a supply of free labor. And this was true in terms of prostitution as well. It was not unusual for a woman who was a prostitute to be married, to have children. And when those children were 12, 13, 14 years of age, for those daughters to enter into prostitution with the full knowledge of the family. In fact, with the expectation of the family, because this was a source of income.
Where'd the money come from that bought that place? Your daddy sold me you for $6.50, so rich relations tough to swallow. It is respectful not to lie, honey, but any further silence will get violent.
Violence was always prevalent in the lives of all prostitutes. A prostitute could suddenly be beaten by a customer, or they could suddenly get into an argument or a disagreement over payment. And if that prostitute was in a locked bedroom in a brothel, she was at a lot of risk until somebody could break down the door to maybe save her from a customer who was trying to strangle her to death.
These guys come out of the field maybe totally drunk or totally mean. Some of them were just plain bitter. Some of them didn't like women. A woman in that trade during that period of time needed a lot of protection. That's all there was to it. If she didn't get the protection, she wouldn't last long.
You're gonna kill me in this fucking shithole. You know how to make it not hurt.
And then, of course, there was the self-inflicted violence. And women did a great deal of violence to themselves through drug addiction, through alcoholism. It was very easy to secure laudanum, and that was a popular form of suicide, to drink a whole lot of alcohol and then drink the bottle of laudanum, and that could often prove to be fatal.
It's the highest rate of suicide in Deadwood was the prostitutes. They had a terrible mortality rate. Those that didn't die from disease or natural causes were so demoralized that they took their own lives in many instances. And others numbed themselves with drugs and alcohol to the point they'd either die or just didn't even know they existed anymore.
If you want, I will do the job for you right. But first, I want you to know that that rich woman is leaving town, and she told me that she would take you with her. And I know that you thought enough of that woman to help her get off this stuff you tried to use to kill yourself with. But what I don't know is if you wanted to die, period, or because you thought you didn't have a way out of here, because you do have a way out.
It's always a mystery to us how prostitutes thought about themselves. What did they hope for out of this? I think that, like all people, they hope to survive and maybe do better and maybe even get lucky and earn a whole lot of money that they would hold on to. They were workers, and as workers, they were looking for goals, for economic futures. That their goals didn't work out the way they hoped is a fairly common human story. And very few people came out of those bonanza days with substantial wealth that they held on to for their lifetime and passed on to their families. That really didn't happen for many people, and certainly not for prostitutes.
What's this about?
I'm down at that hardware store. They're fucking harping and badgering.
Who's harping? The Jew?
You making a fucking pun?
I'm asking a fucking question.
The Jew. And fucking Bullock also. I'm erratic with my decimals and the like.
So, harping. Now's a hardship on the same fucking order of a boot on your fucking neck. Do not fucking fault them, Trixie, for your own fucking fears of tumbling to something new.
What we know about the real Deadwood versus what is a story is a hard line to draw. Of course, history as itself is interpretation. And a historian takes the basic facts. What are the facts? People came to Deadwood in 1876 and dug in that stream and got lots of gold. That's a fact. How did they react when they got the gold? Did they go out and shoot their neighbor to take his claim? Were they order-driven people, or were they murderous thugs? I like the sense of community. There was a stronger sense of order there than often is believed in this outlaw town.
It's very easy to overlook in a town like Deadwood that, in fact, the people there were building community. It seems that Deadwood is just wide open, there's no law and order, nobody cares about what's going on, it's just the rule of the most powerful and who can make the most money. But people, when they gather together, they build community. And that was definitely going on in Deadwood. Everything in the West is about building institutions and trying to establish community. What are our rules going to be? Who is going to enforce those rules? Who will have to obey the rules in our community? Who will be excused from those rules?
William Bullock, beloved son of Martha and Seth, called to God age 11 years.
These patterns are very important in understanding that a wide open town was still a place where people tried to build community.
Those who wish to pay final respects to the corpse of William Bullock are invited now into the Bullock home.